In the future, a new virus called the maize virus spreads across Europe, turning infected people into deadly zombies. Most of the continent manages to contain the outbreak, but Ireland is completely devastated. Eventually, a cure is discovered, but it only works on 75% of those infected, while the remaining 25% prove resistant to the treatment. Those who recover become known as the recovered and are allowed to return to their normal lives. The ones who remain immune to the cure are known as the resistant, and they are kept in confinement, even though public opinion strongly favors eliminating them to prevent another outbreak. The recovered still remember the time they spent as zombies and the terrible things they did during that period. As a result, many suffer from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Sean is haunted by bloody visions from his past, so he rushes to a mirror to check himself. Veins appear near the corner of his eye, a distinctive mark of the recovered, which helps calm him down slightly. Later, his fellow survivor Connor comes to visit him. They talk about how hard it is to believe that life might finally return to normal. Soon after, Sean meets Major Cantor, a rehabilitation officer. Sean explains that he was infected 4 years ago and still suffers from nightmares. Cantor considers this a good thing, believing that the recovered should always remember how much suffering they caused. Cantor then announces that Sean will be placed under the care of his foster sister, Abigail. This comes as a huge surprise because most people still view the recovered as dangerous and contaminated, making them unwilling to welcome them into their homes. As a result, many of the recovered spend their lives in residential centers. As Sean and Connor ride the bus, they notice how much the city has changed. Soldiers and military camps are everywhere, people are protesting in the streets, and the government is debating what to do with the resistant. Outside the residential center, dozens of protesters throw objects and chant that the recovered are murderers and not human. When Sean and Connor arrive, they embrace and say goodbye. Connor asks Sean not to reveal his secret to his foster sister. Abigail is a journalist living with her son, Killian. Sadly, her husband, Luke, died during the outbreak. When Sean arrives, Abigail warmly welcomes him. He tells her she does not have to help him, but she replies that Luke would have done the same, and besides, this is his home too. Later, she asks him about Luke's final moments, but Sean explains that they were separated during the evacuation that night. Unable to sleep, Sean reflects on how everything began. He and Luke were together when evacuation sirens started sounding throughout the city. Luke immediately went searching for his family but could not find them. At that moment, a zombie appeared behind Sean and attacked him. Luke tried to save him, striking the creature with a nearby tool, but it was already too late. Sean had been infected. Luke told him to run, then slammed a door shut behind him. However, Sean lost control and began violently attacking the door. The next day, Connor visits his father and asks for help finding a better job. He currently works as a janitor but wants to return to practicing law, the profession he had before becoming infected. His father reacts with disgust, shoving him away and calling him a monster because of what he did to his mother while he was infected. Meanwhile, Sean takes his old bicycle and heads to the treatment center where he works. A guard checks his eye to confirm that he is one of the recovered before allowing him inside. Dr. Joanne informs him that he will be working with a resistant patient named Joe, who is strapped to a bed. The moment Joe sees the doctor, she becomes violent, screaming and struggling to break free from her restraints. Sean manages to calm her down and hold her still because she hates the doctor but does not view him as an enemy. This allows Joanne to administer an injection. Joanne explains that Joe recognized Sean as someone like herself because traces of the virus still remain in his cells despite his recovery. Afterward, Sean sits with Joe, helps her bathe, and treats her with kindness and compassion. At the same time, when Abigail goes to pick up Killian from school, the other mothers judge her for allowing a monster to live in her home. Later, Sean visits Connor at the residential center and tells him that the resistant do not attack the recovered. This leads Connor to believe that the recovered might actually be safer among the resistant than among the ordinary people who constantly discriminate against them. Their conversation is interrupted when Cantor arrives and criticizes Connor for not working. Connor insists that he is not a janitor, But Cantor reminds him that the world has changed and that they must adapt to the new rules. He then tells Connor to stop contacting his family because they do not want him back in their lives. Hearing this, Connor loses his temper and attacks Cantor. Cantor quickly slams him onto a table and throws him to the ground. Sean tries to help his friend, but 2 armed guards restrain him. That night, Sean dreams that he is a zombie again and attacks a child. When he wakes up, he finds racist and hateful newspapers scattered outside the door. At the same time, Joanne is horrified to learn that the government has decided to begin executing all of the resistant, and has promised that every one of them will be dead before the end of the week. Meanwhile, Connor grows closer to Abigail and introduces himself as Sean's friend. Abigail is extremely kind toward the recovered and asks him about his experience. Connor tells her how difficult it was being trapped inside his own body, and how impossible it was to resist the overwhelming thirst for blood. At the treatment center, Sean helps Joanne search for a better cure while continuing to work with Joe. During a break, he notices 2 soldiers entering the building where the resistant are being held. Suddenly, he hears a woman screaming and follows the sound into a room. There he finds one soldier restraining a female resistant while another soldier urinates on her legs. Sean angrily confronts the soldier, but the man easily overpowers him using his military training and slams him against a wall. The resistant woman takes advantage of the distraction, breaks free, and runs through the hallways. One of the soldiers immediately pulls out his pistol and shoots her. Sean is devastated as he watches her die, but the soldier coldly tells him that she was going to die anyway. At the same time, the protests in the streets grow even more intense. Joanne appears on the news defending the rights of the resistant, arguing that she simply needs more time to find a better cure. The news anchor disagrees, claiming that executing the resistant is an act of mercy that will protect society. When Connor hears this, he says that the government will eventually come after the recovered as well and insists that they must stop it by any means necessary. Later, he takes Sean beneath the residential center, where a group of rebels has formed an alliance known as the Recovered to fight for their rights. The group has prepared several Molotov cocktails, and Connor assures everyone that they will only be thrown at empty houses. However, that night, the rebels target several homes belonging to soldiers and set them on fire. Meanwhile, Abigail is awakened by a call from her editor, who wants her to cover the incident. As she gets up, she notices that Sean is not in his room. The next morning, the news reports on the Recovered Alliance, labeling it a terrorist organization. Sean is shocked when he learns that someone died in the attacks. From that point on, anyone protesting for the rights of the recovered is subject to arrest. Soon afterward, Sean begins experiencing flashbacks again and sees himself as a zombie. His memories reveal a horrifying truth: Connor was the one who originally bit him. Luke had tried to bring his brother back to his senses, but Sean attacked and killed him in the very house where Abigail now lives. At the clinic, Sean discovers a photograph of Joanne and Joe together. He learns that they were once in love and that they worked side by side to develop the cure before Joe became infected. When Sean returns home, Abigail asks whether he has been attending meetings of the Recovered Alliance because he leaves the house every night. He denies it. She then tells him how terrible it was to come home and find her husband's body lying on the floor. Moved by her pain and grief, Sean takes Abigail and Killian to a beautiful location outside the city. He explains that he and Luke used to visit that spot all the time when they were children. That night, Connor visits Sean at the house, but things become tense when Abigail says that killing the resistant to prevent another outbreak may be a reasonable idea. At the same time, she supports the rights of the recovered and believes they should not be punished for actions they committed while they were zombies, since they had no control over themselves. This causes Connor to ask whether she would forgive the person who killed her husband. Abigail is upset by the question and leaves the room. Afterward, Sean confronts Connor about lying regarding the empty houses and tells him that he is leaving the Alliance. The next day, Sean takes Killian to school. Meanwhile, Cantor visits Abigail under the pretense of checking on the family of a recovered individual. After asking a few routine questions, he begins revealing his true beliefs. Cantor argues that zombies were never mindless creatures. He believes they hunted in organized groups, communicated with one another, and even developed plans for killing. Before leaving, he hands Abigail a confidential file and asks her to contact him if she discovers anything suspicious. When Abigail opens the file, she is horrified to find photographs of Sean and Connor during their time as zombies. Later, Abigail sneaks into the residential center through a back entrance to gather footage for a report. There, she films 5 recovered individuals standing in a circle with their eyes closed while regulating their breathing. When one of the recovered notices her, she quickly heads to the second floor, where she finds Connor delivering a speech intended to recruit more recovered members to the rebellion. Suddenly, a woman Abigail had seen earlier shoves her against the wall, but Connor intervenes before the situation escalates. Abigail accuses him of being behind the bombings and tells him to stay away from her family. She also mentions Kenter's theory about zombies hunting in packs, which immediately raises Connor's suspicions because she should not have known that information. As Abigail leaves, she notices several people following her and attempting to take her camera. She runs and hides inside an empty room before climbing out through a window. A man grabs her and tries to pull her back inside, but she fights back, slamming the window frame onto his hand before escaping. Back at Joanne's clinic, word arrives that soldiers have executed all of the resistant being held on the first level of the facility. Shortly afterward, Joanne notices Joe lying on her bed and approaches her in an attempt to reconnect. When Joanne tries to touch her, Joe suddenly lunges at her and knocks her to the floor. The commotion immediately attracts the guards, who rush into the room and loop a rope around Joe's neck as if she were an animal. They announce that they are taking her away to be executed along with the others. Ignoring Joanne's tears and desperate pleas, they allow her only a brief moment with Joe. That night, Joanne secretly meets with Connor. Meanwhile, Abigail discovers another batch of hateful newspapers and flyers attached to her window. When she steps outside to investigate, no one is around. Suddenly, a masked man breaks into the house and strikes Sean with a club. Calling him a filthy recovered, the attacker covers the walls of the living room with more hateful flyers. As Sean writhes in pain on the floor, he begins hallucinating Luke's death once again. The man hits him a second time, knocking him unconscious before fleeing. The following morning, the police quickly arrive after seeing the flyers. However, they explain that incidents like this happen frequently to recovered families and that there is little they can do without additional information. Later, Sean goes to see Connor and admits that he was right. He says he wants to rejoin the Alliance in order to protect his family. At the same time, Abigail discovers that the intruder who broke into the house stole the memory card from her camera, which contained footage of the rebels' meeting. She suspects that someone from the Alliance was responsible, so she calls Cantor and tells him that Connor is planning something. At the residential center, Sean joins an Alliance meeting and is shocked to find Joanne there. They are discussing a plan to rescue Joe, but Sean insists that he does not want any guards to be killed. Suddenly, they hear noises and realize that soldiers are storming the building and attacking anyone who resists. Connor and the rebels immediately flee, but Sean refuses to run with them, and the soldiers quickly capture him. They interrogate him, but he remains completely silent. Shortly afterward, Connor finds Abigail and Killian in the park and tells her that Sean is the one who killed Luke. He then shows her the bite mark that Luke left on his neck while trying to save his brother. Meanwhile, Cantor interrogates Sean and offers protection for his family in exchange for cooperation, but Sean refuses to talk. Since there is not enough evidence, he is released. As he leaves, another recovered hands him a message from Connor containing details about the next meeting. When Sean returns home, Abigail demands the truth. Eventually, he admits that he was indeed the one who killed Luke. Abigail is devastated that he lied to her for so long and throws him out of the house, crying uncontrollably. That night, Sean meets Connor, who explains that he told Abigail the truth so Sean would learn that even people who seem kind can turn against the recovered at any moment. Sean then realizes that Connor does not suffer from the nightmares that haunt the other recovered. Moments later, Cantor arrives with enough evidence to link them to the bombings. Sean surrenders and allows himself to be handcuffed, but Connor grabs a broken bottle and attacks Cantor, repeatedly stabbing him in the neck until the Major dies. Connor then takes Cantor's gun and points it at Sean, accusing him of betraying him to the authorities. Sean explains that he could no longer allow Connor to continue hurting people. At that moment, they hear ambulances approaching. Connor says that the plan has already begun and escapes. The next day, the recovered infiltrate the treatment center dressed as doctors, using uniforms provided by Joanne. They stab the guards and make their way to the control room. There, Joanne enters the password to unlock Joe's room. However, one of the rebel recovered forces Joanne back at gunpoint and opens all the other cells as well, ignoring her protests. Meanwhile, Sean arrives at the building and walks through the hallways filled with the resistant without being harmed because they can smell the virus still lingering inside him. When the armed rebel tries to stop him, Sean knocks him to the ground. At that moment, more soldiers arrive and begin shooting at any resistant attempting to escape. The rebels detonate a bomb that destroys the main gate, allowing the resistant to flee outside. Sean tries to avoid the chaos, but the rebel he confronted earlier is not so fortunate. He then notices that Joe is still inside her room. Once outside, Sean sees zombies attacking soldiers and feeding on their flesh. At the same time, Joanne realizes that Joe remains in her room and sits beside her. The two women hold hands, but a feral resistance suddenly attacks Joanne and bites her. Back at the house, Abigail hears terrifying roars, grabs an axe, and goes outside to face the zombies. When one approaches her, she strikes it immediately. As more zombies close in, military trucks arrive and begin evacuating the area. Abigail desperately wants to get to the school to save Killian, but the soldiers force her to stay with them. Sean runs through the streets while soldiers fire at zombies all around him. He spots Abigail being loaded into one of the trucks, and she screams for him to save Killian. Across the city, fierce battles erupt between soldiers and zombies. Connor attempts to approach one of the creatures, but he watches a soldier shoot it before another zombie attacks the soldier. The evacuated civilians, including Abigail, are taken to a quarantine camp, while the recovered are denied entry. Sean races through the chaos until he reaches the school. Children are fleeing in every direction as teachers and soldiers are attacked by zombies. He calls out for Killian until he finds him hiding beside a wall. He picks him up and runs, unaware that Connor is watching. Several blocks later, Connor appears with a zombie and tries to get to Killian. Sean orders the boy to run and charges at the creature to buy time. More zombies begin chasing Killian, while Connor strikes Sean from behind with a metal pipe to stop him from following. When Sean tries to fight back and escape, Connor hits his leg and continues beating him. All around them, soldiers keep firing at the zombies. A stray bullet strikes Connor, knocking him to the ground. Sean finally has a chance to kill him, but then he hears Killian screaming for help and chooses to save his nephew instead of taking revenge. Killian is hiding beneath a car as the zombies close in. Sean has no choice but to fight them off with the metal pipe until he clears a path. He then carries Killian away and notices that Connor has disappeared. At the quarantine zone, Abigail tells a soldier that the recovered deserve better treatment and spits in his face. The soldier responds by kicking her in the stomach, which enrages the gathered recovered and causes them to surge toward the safe zone. Abigail uses the chaos to escape into a nearby building and climbs the stairs. After walking a short distance, she discovers the body of a dead soldier. Suddenly, a zombie appears behind her. Abigail grabs the soldier's gun and shoots it. Moments later, the soldier himself rises as a zombie, forcing her to kill him as well. At the treatment center, Joe stares silently at Joanne's corpse for a while before leaving the building. By then, night has fallen. When Abigail returns home, Sean arrives as well with Killian, who runs into his mother's arms. Without warning, a zombie leaps at them and bites Killian before Sean tackles it and beats it to death in a frenzy of anger and frustration. Abigail considers killing her son before he turns, but Sean takes Killian from her and promises to keep him safe until a cure can be found. He then leaves, leaving Abigail alone in tears. Sometime later, the news announces that order has been restored, but around 8,000 zombies remain in confinement. The government continues executing the resistant, claiming it is the only way to eradicate the virus forever. The streets become covered with posters of Connor, who has become a symbol of the rebellion. Abigail remains deeply worried about her son, but she smiles when she hears a news report stating that a small group of infected survivors is still living hidden away in the countryside. Sean and Killian are part of that group, doing everything they can to survive. And that is the end of the film. Thank you for watching, and don't forget that your opinions matter to us. Be sure to leave a comment and subscribe to the channel.